To India now, where the government is intensifying its decades-long campaign against left-wing Maoist insurgents. Security forces are ramping up operations in the central state. In a recent offensive, 27 suspected rebels were killed, bringing the insurgent death toll to over 200 this year alone. Now, DW's Adil Bhat traveled to the Bastar forests in that region where this war is reshaping the lives of India's most marginalized tribal communities.
This special police unit is patrolling in the heart of Chhattisgarh state in central India. Its mission is to track down Maoist insurgents, locally known as the Naxals. Regular operations are now routine, aimed at crushing the decades-old insurgency. Today, Commando Officer Sanjay Paul is leading the operation in these dense forests. He says they are a perfect hiding place for the Naxal fighters and their ambushes.
We've received a tip-off about Naxal movement in the area. We're patrolling and moving ahead. Depending on the situation, we'll search the entire area. We'll return after taking the appropriate action.
The Maoist movement in India started in 1967, when the village of Naxalbari in the state of West Bengal rebelled against landowners. Since then, the Maoists have waged a shadow war, claiming to fight for the rights of marginalized indigenous groups. In early February, the Indian government promised to eliminate the Maoists by next year.
Since this is a Naxal-dominated area, there's always a danger of ambush. We have to tread carefully as there are landmines and bombs planted in this region. We'll return to our base only after completing the military operation.
These operations have left a heavy toll on local indigenous communities. The Adivasis, as they are called in India, live amid constant fear. We traveled 20 miles through dense forest to reach Budga village, where families are mourning their dead. Sukli OM, mother of Ramesh, is remembering her son who was killed by a bullet in a crossfire between security forces and Naxal insurgents last year. On that day, Ramesh, a farmer, was on his way to bathe in the river when the bullet hit him.
After my son's killing, we fear leaving our homes, and my life has changed. Now, whenever the police enter our area, villagers like me hide inside their houses. During encounters, our life comes to a halt.
Sukli is not alone. She takes us to her neighbor, Raje Ayam, who was shot in the back inside her house during the hunt for Maoists. Raji tells us that commandos barged into her house, suspecting Maoists were inside, and opened fire while she was feeding her child.
Since I was injured, my body doesn't work. I'm not able to farm or to work in the jungle. My body has been almost paralyzed, and I'm barely able to walk.
Locals say the line between insurgents and civilians has blurred. Many accuse military and police units of failing to distinguish between the two. But the government's message is clear: surrender or be wiped out. This hardline approach has triggered a wave of surrenders. Today, at this police station in the Bastar district, dozens of Naxals have turned themselves in. Some disillusioned, others exhausted, and many drawn by promises of rehabilitation.
Currently, the government is having a new Naxal rehabilitation policy where they'll be given a proper training, and with regard to any of the trades that they would choose, like driving or masonry, plumbing, electrician work, or anything that they are interested in.
Among the Maoists who surrendered is Amit Barsa, who spent 12 years on the front lines.
I surrendered at a time when the situation is very critical. The police are deployed deep inside, and you cannot survive in such an environment. I joined the Maoist movement because I was influenced by the Naxal ideology.
The number of fighters hiding in these jungles is now dwindling. But the consequences of the government's campaign can be felt in the villages as well. At home, Sukli OM carries her grief in silence. Her son is gone, and so is her trust in both sides. of this long, brutal war.
And let's get more. We are joined by DW reporter Adil Bhat, who is back in Delhi and speaking with us now. You've talked to other indigenous people whose rights the rebels claim to be defending. What is your impression? Do the majority of them want the conflict to end?
Of course, Sarah, everyone we met on the ground wants an end to this long and brutal conflict. Even for last 6 decades, people have suffered in this ongoing insurgency. And almost, like we have to remember, 12,000 civilians, security personnel, and Naxal fighters have been killed. So, Sarah, what's happening in recent years is that regular military operations have a huge human cost. And we visited a village in Bastar region, and then also to the surrounding forest to meet the locals about to understand the consequences of these ongoing military operations that they have to pay. And when we went there and we met those villagers, what we saw was that there are hundreds of families who lost their loved ones, mostly in crossfires. We also met locals who alleged that they have lost their family members in fake encounters. And on the ground, we got a sense there's a lot of resentment among the people. And many told us they have never received any compensation for their raw loss of human or material loss. Apart from these families that we already saw in the report, there were many others who narrated their experience in the conflict. I remember, one grieving father who traveled 6 hours just on foot to meet us, and he told us that I just want to know the world story of my son. And he said to us, like, whenever you go back to Delhi, please take our story and people should know. And he said that security forces have killed his son, who had nothing to do with Naxalism, when he was working on his farm. So these are stories that we witnessed on the field, and they have sparked a lot of concerns, usually among civilian society members. And we spoke with one lawyer and human rights activist there. She told us that these relentless state-backed counterinsurgency operations have turned Bastar forests into war zones where villagers continue to face brutal state violence and the people live in a constant fear. So she also said one important thing that I still remember. She said that this conflict has turned Bastar into a graveyard. I kind of got a sense that people are really miserable out there, and they told us that they don't even have a way out of the situation, how to come out of the situation.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has pledged to end Maoism by 2026. How realistic is that?
For the state, it's a realistic goal, and it depends on who do we pose this question. If we ask this question to the government says it's a realistic goal, and they're close to achieving it. But if you ask the same question to analysts or activists on the ground, they will differ and say that it's impossible to completely dismantle an ideology, especially when it draws inspiration from an ideology rooted in claims of justice and class struggle. Because this ideology is, of course, inspired by Leninism, Maoism. They say that as long as there is injustice, the Maoist ideology will survive. So far, but if we talk to the government's efforts, they have launched successive targeted military operations in the last 1 year. And thus we're talking about 2024 to 2025 as the bloodiest period for Maoist insurgents. And we saw recently the Chief Minister of the state of Chhattisgarh has said that they have 400 Naxalites. We met some officials, police officials, and they told us that the Maoist insurgents is currently on the back foot. In fact, we met several standard Naxals we saw in the report as well, and they told us that the movement is weakening because of lack of funds and weapons. Okay. So not only that, in the last several months, we saw the security forces have neutralized some of the top leadership of Mao. So this impacts the morale of the rebels. But now the big question still remains, can the Maoist insurgency be defeated entirely? And we posed this question to a lot of them. They said we have to wait for this till next year.
DW reporter Adil Bhat, thank you.